Have you ever found yourself walking through a bustling modern city and just wondered, how exactly does all this chaotic urban sprawl get systematically designed into a living, breathing place? I mean, it definitely doesn't just happen by accident. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to unpack the hidden DNA of the modern Egyptian city by taking a deep dive into the Unified Building Law number 119 of 2008. We're going to see how a massive, highly complex legal document literally acts as the ultimate blueprint for the streets you walk on, the air you breathe, and the community you live in. Now, to really understand where we are today, we kind of have to look at where we started. Think about the stark contrast between classic Islamic architecture and the sheer, massive scale of modern cityscapes. Back in the day, ancient Islamic cities relied heavily on the principles of Islamic jurisprudence, religious and moral guidelines, to maintain harmony and order. It was a very organic, values-based system. But as populations absolutely exploded and technology advanced, well, that organic growth just became unsustainable without some strict modern urban codes. And that transition to modern law, yeah, it wasn't an overnight thing in Egypt for sure. We had early regulations starting as far back as 1881. Then came Law 106 in 1976 for building organization, followed closely by Law 3 in 1982, which was really the first true urban planning law. But honestly, over a century of fragmented, constantly evolving, and sometimes completely overlapping rules desperately pointed to the need for one unified solution. We needed something to just cut through all that bureaucratic noise. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to explore exactly how this unified solution breaks down into a three-dimensional blueprint. We'll quickly cover the evolution of urbanism, the comprehensive law itself, its three main pillars, the urban, social, and economic aspects, and finally, future planning. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Evolution of urbanism, from historical jurisprudence to modern legislation. Moving right along to Section 2, the Comprehensive Unified Building Law, the Master Playbook of 2008. Okay, so in 2008, Egypt enacted Law No. 119 to finally consolidate all those scattered urban, social, and economic regulations into one single entity. And right out of the gate, Article 9 introduces something called the General Strategic Plan. Now, this isn't just your basic street map. According to the law, this strategic plan is the core operational document that defines the fundamental urban, social, economic, and environmental features of any city or village. It is literally the master blueprint guiding every single aspect of a municipality's future growth. But how does this master plan actually get made? Well, under Article 14, city planning is actually an active democratic process. It requires inviting everyday citizens, NGOs, and local representatives to the table. The plan is presented to local popular councils, the public's feedback is officially recorded, and here's the kicker, modifications are actually made based on that input. The whole thing is designed specifically to prevent top-down decrees and make sure the community has a real voice in its own blueprint. All right, Section 3. Organization and urban aspects, laying the concrete foundation. So let's dive into the first major pillar of our blueprint, the strict physical urban rules that dictate the actual layout of your neighborhood. Look, if you've ever moved to a new development and worried about, say, access to a good school or a doctor, well, the law has you covered. According to Articles 30, 33, and 34, detailed residential plans legally have to guarantee specific public services. They must map out educational facilities, health centers, religious buildings, and commercial areas. It ensures that neighborhoods are actually functionally livable, not just isolated blocks of concrete. 10 meters. Under Article 26 of the law, that is the absolute minimum street width for any new urban extension areas. Just think about that for a second. The law specifically engineers the physical space between buildings to make sure there's enough light, enough air, and enough room to move. It's actively preventing those claustrophobic, overcrowded streets we've all seen. And hey, before a single brick is laid above ground, the underground has to be totally secured. Article 46 ensures that no detailed urban plan gets approved without plotting out vital infrastructure first. We're talking water supply, sewage networks, electricity, roads, telecommunications, and even solid waste management. It mandates that the invisible arteries of the city are fully functional long before anyone even packs a moving box.
Okay, but what happens after the buildings are finished and people actually move in? Well, the law introduces the union of occupants in Articles 155 through 185. To completely de-jargonify this for a second, if your building has more than 5 units, the law mandates the creation of this union. It's simply the everyday citizen's legal tool and, frankly, their responsibility to jointly manage and maintain their building. Yep, that means you actually have to agree with your neighbors on fixing the roof, but it's absolutely crucial for ensuring your real estate doesn't fall into disrepair, which protects the nation's overall real estate wealth.
Which brings us to Section 4, Social Dimension and Residents' Lives, Protecting the Citizen.
This second pillar focuses on how the legislation actively protects the daily social well-being, health, and privacy of the residents. Have you ever wondered why that super noisy, dusty factory is kept safely at a distance from your home? It's definitely not a coincidence. Articles 40 and 43 mandate exact, legally binding buffer zones. There has to be at least a 20-meter buffer between residential areas and craft zones, and a 25-meter buffer from larger industrial zones. The law literally measures and enforces your peace and quiet. And you know what? The zoning goes even deeper into public health. Article 42 is such a fascinating layer of protection. It flat out dictates that you cannot place polluting industries anywhere near food, electronic, or pharmaceutical production facilities. It's like the law is acting as a giant puzzle master, determining exactly which types of industries are allowed to be neighbors, all to prevent dangerous cross-contamination. Next up, Section 5, the economic base of cities, funding the future. Because let's be real, a city cannot survive on concrete alone. It needs a thriving, calculated economic base to generate jobs and income, and this is clearly outlined in Article 13. To actually achieve this, Article 31 scales the commercial heartbeat of the city by mandating hierarchical markets. It plans for everything from your little local neighborhood corner market, scaling up to a residential district center, expanding to the main city center, and finally mapping out massive regional hubs. It's a completely engineered economic ecosystem. But as cities grow economically, they obviously sometimes need to adapt existing spaces. And that brings us to a really critical question. What actually happens if the city needs your land for a public project or needs to redevelop an unplanned area? This whole complex issue of eminent domain is covered extensively in Articles 64 through 71. The good news? The law doesn't just allow the city to simply take the land without a word. It provides incredibly clear negotiation mechanisms. Article 70 gives property owners distinct choices for fair compensation. You can opt for a financial payout before the project even begins, you can choose an in-kind property exchange, or you can even wait to receive compensation or property after the new project is totally finished. It carefully balances the city's need to grow with the citizens' absolute right to fairness.
Finally, Section 6, the future of your city's planning, putting the blueprint into action.
All right, let's bring the whole shebang together, the urban, the social, the economic. To summarize, Law 119 aims to be way more than just a dry, boring list of bureaucratic building restrictions. It's structured as a holistic, three-dimensional blueprint intended to foster a functional, healthy, and economically viable society. Every single line of the code is meant to support the human experience within the concrete.
I really hope this explainer leaves you looking at your own neighborhood through an entirely new structural lens. Seriously, the next time you walk down your street, take a second to notice the width of the road, the distance to the nearest shop, or the location of the local clinic. Ask yourself, which specific article of the law designed the exact space you're standing in? Thank you so much for exploring the invisible architecture of the city with me today.